We're having a well-earned break after the drama of Baku, but don't worry, we've got you covered with Chequered Flag Extra. Just make sure you're subscribed to BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone settings so you never miss a new episode. This week, we'll react a little more to the events in Baku and McLaren's problems. A sign of things to come? Is Verstappen genuinely in the title hunt? We'll also talk about Fernando Alonso's recent comments and discuss Christian Horner. Plus, we'll hear from Williams driver Alex Albon. I'm Harry Benjamin, and getting no such well-earned break is the BBC's F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson. Andrew, busy writing your stories on the BBC Sport website, and we'll touch on those in a couple of moments. But we've had a few days now to reflect on Baku. What are your thoughts now? It was a really messy weekend, actually, in total for McLaren. Is that going to be a worry going forward for them?
Well, they won't want to have another one, that's for sure. It was uncharacteristically messy from them, and both drivers, Norris crashed once and Piastri crashed twice. Obviously, Piastri's mistakes were much bigger than Norris's because they happened in qualifying and the race. But he's kind of got away with them, Harry, hasn't he? Because Norris could only finish 7th. So the gap came down only to 25 points. Still a clear victory with 7 races to go, so relatively comfortable. But I'm sure Piastri has been looking at his weekend and wondering what went wrong and trying to ensure in this gap now between Baku and Singapore that he doesn't do that again.
And the thing is, though, as you say, Lando Norris wasn't really able to capitalise as much as I'm sure he would have liked to with his teammate out of the race halfway through lap 1. But Red Bull and Max Verstappen, 2 successive wins now for the Dutchman. This looks like a genuinely improved Red Bull car now, and people are saying that, well, don't rule Verstappen out of this title fight just yet. I know it's a long shot, but it's not impossible.
No, it's not. I mean, look, let's just be realistic for a minute. 69 points with 7 races to go, albeit there are 3 sprints in the mix there as well. That's an awfully long way to come back from. And it's actually not dissimilar from the situation, if you reverse the situation, from Verstappen and Norris last year, where we were all at this stage of the year thinking, can Norris catch Verstappen? The gap was about this sort of level. And of course, he couldn't catch Verstappen, and he didn't even get close. And I think as long as McLaren keep performing at their normal level, he isn't going to catch them, certainly not Piastri. And I think on the Red Bull performance, we could definitely say that Red Bull have made a step forward on those type of circuits. And I think that's the key. Andrea Stella, the McLaren team principal, said over the course of the Baku weekend that if you'd asked him which race was going to be most problematic for their car, he would have said either Baku or Las Vegas. Now, of course, Las Vegas is still to come. But it's all the things that McLaren's not good at and lots of things that Red Bull are. And they made some changes to the car setup in Monza to do with basically running a bit more front wing while trimming off the rear wing. That's given Verstappen the turn-in that he likes. And he's run with it really impressively to take 2 really dominant victories, 2 of the most dominant of the season. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to translate to the same level of dominance in other tracks. So, for example, Singapore, which is the next race, is a track where Verstappen and Red Bull have not always gone that well. Now, they did actually do quite well last year. I think they finished behind Norris in the race. It's not like it's like the end of the world for them at Singapore, but Singapore is the sort of race where McLaren should come back into it. It's high downforce. I would expect them to be more competitive. So I think they're right to be worried about Verstappen, but I don't think they should be having too many sleepless nights at this stage.
No, but positive from the Red Bull camp, at least, that they are making some visible progress. A reminder that you can email your thoughts and questions to f1@bbc.co.uk or use the hashtag BBCF1 on X. You'll see on the F1 Q&A page on the BBC Sport website, we've had a few questions come in. On the subject of Red Bull, Christian Horner has formally left Red Bull this week. BBC Sport's been told by a source close to the team that Horner secured a payoff worth €60 million, so that's about £52 million. This has essentially confirmed the inevitable, right, Andrew?
Yes, this was always going to happen. They were always going to have to negotiate a severance deal, and assuming my source is correct, and they are absolutely adamant, 100% confidence they gave me for that number that they shared with me. Then they've effectively paid off his contract to the end of 2030, which was when his deal ran to. So he's done quite nicely out of it. Obviously, other media outlets are reporting higher numbers, but this is the way of it. Of course, nobody knows for sure unless they're a Red Bull or Christian Horner lawyer, or Red Bull or Christian Horner themselves, which we are none of those things. But he's very comfortably established for the rest of his life, isn't he? But of course, I'm sure Horner wants to come back to Formula One, and he now has an opportunity to do that at some point next year after whatever period of time he's agreed with Red Bull that he can't has passed.
It's interesting, though, looking at where the opportunities are for him to come back, because we obviously discussed a lot during his time at Red Bull the political struggles and his role as team principal, but also CEO. And there's that structure, isn't there, now that I think Horner wants, but doesn't seem to be a thing anymore, where the team principal also has the same kind of power as an owner of the team. You go back to Eddie Jordan or Colin Chapman, somebody like that. That doesn't quite seem to be the case anymore. Well, it isn't the case anymore. So where do you think the opportunities are for Horner in the future?
Well, there might not be any opportunities, Harry. That's the thing. I mean, obviously, on one level, he's quite appealing to a potential, investor who wants to make his team more successful. Of course, he brings a lot of baggage with him after the way his Red Bull career imploded over the past 18 months as well. Equally, I'm told that he doesn't want to come back as just a team principal. He wants to come back with a shareholding, and he wants to have a very high level of control. Now, the problem with that for him moving forward is, of course, Formula One teams are very expensive entities, and although Horner is a very rich man now, he doesn't have the sort of financial wherewithal to buy a team himself, or even to take a majority shareholding in a team. So, as an example, McLaren was valued at £3.5 billion in a recent sort of shareholding restructure. Most Formula One team valuations start at £1 billion minimum and go up from there, depending on how good the team is. So that's an inordinately large amount of money, the sort of money that he doesn't have personally. So he'd need somebody else to want him to be in charge and to back him, which removes the idea of control, because, of course, if you're not the owner, you're not in control anymore. Then what sort of teams could want him? Well, he isn't going to go anywhere with a Mercedes engine, I don't think, given his history with Mercedes and Toto Wolff, who really doesn't like him at all. At Ferrari, obviously, John Elkann, the chairman, is in control. And at Aston Martin, which is a name that people have been banding around along with Alpine, which I'll come on to in a minute, Adrian Newey's gone there. And why did Adrian Newey leave Red Bull and go to Aston Martin? Because he'd fallen out with Christian Horner, essentially, over the allegations that were made against him by the female employee, which he's always denied. So of course, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's definitely a stumbling block. And on the Alpine front, they've got a Mercedes engine deal. That's another area that people rumours have said Horner could be potentially of interest to. So we don't know at this stage, Harry, and I don't think he's got anything lined up at this stage. But of course, he does have a very strong track record in Formula One, and you could see why on that level he would be appealing to someone.
A huge character as well to have in the paddock. How interesting do you think that we've seen this sort of rise of engineers as team principals over the last few years? Andrea Stella, Laurent Mekies now, who replaced Horner, Alan Permain now in at Racing Bulls, Ai Komatsu, James Vowles. It's like it's a marked shift, I think, in who becomes a team principal these days.
It is, and I think one of the most interesting things that's happened in the context of Red Bull's revival in the last couple of races is one of the things that Max Verstappen said after the Italian Grand Prix. He said, up until now, we've had a lot of races where we were just shooting left and right a little bit with the setup of the car. Quite extreme changes, which shows that we were not in control. We were not fully understanding what to do. With Laurent having an engineering background, he's asking the right questions to the engineers, common sense questions. So I think that works really well. Now, of course, there's two ways of looking at that. One is Verstappen's very impressed with how Laurent Mekies has refocused the team and their engineering approach. And he's obviously making a direct link between that and the step forward that they've made in the last couple of races. But by implication, he's also saying that under the previous leadership, the right questions were not being asked by the leadership. And so I think that's why there's been this trend towards engineering team principles. Andrea Stella at McLaren is a really good example. He's an excellent engineer. He was the race engineer for Michael Schumacher, for Kimi Raikkonen, for Fernando Alonso at Ferrari. When he moved to McLaren, he took on a more senior role, but still as an engineer. And he leads, although he's very much team principal and he's very much in charge of the team, he's doing so with, all of that engineering expertise backing him up. So you can, and if you've got a clear-sighted vision in the way that Andrea Stella has, and you're the sort of personality that can create a culture that people buy into, which Andrea Stella clearly also has, then that can become a really powerful, motivating and structural force, as Stella and McLaren have shown over the last couple of years with the incredible revival that they've been through. It looks a little bit like Laurent Mekies, who is very well regarded in the paddock, could be of the same sort of vein. So you can see why the appeal, what the appeal of these people is.
Well, and one of them is, as I mentioned, James Vowles, who took his first podium as Williams team principal over the weekend in Baku with Carlos Sainz. That was one of the other big stories. Williams' first podium since 2021 or 2017, if we're taking full Grand Prix distance raced into account. But let's not get picky. So let's hear from one of the team's stars now. It's Alex Albon, who raced at Red Bull. He's been a real driving force in Williams' upturn in fortunes under James Vowles. I sat down with Alex prior to Baku to chat about his career to date and his ambitions for the future.
5 Live's Chequered Flag Podcast.
Alex Albon, thank you very much for joining me on this lovely sofa. We're quite cosy and next to each other.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I want to start at the beginning. What was that first taste? What did you see? What happened to you that meant, yes, I want to be a racing driver?
Oh, at the very beginning. I wouldn't understand it myself. I think if you spoke to my parents, they always tell me I was car obsessed. I think you're a typical kid. So think about Hot Wheels, think about remote controlled. Electric was a big thing in my world, and anything with 4 wheels generally I was obsessed. And then immediately with the ability to drive at kind of 5 years old, we lived on a farm when I was a kid growing up, and quad bikes. My dad got me a quad bike, and I think within like a 5.5, I figured out how to get the thing on 2 wheels and start to do that kind of
pushing
thing.
the
Exactly. So that was fun, and that's where it all started from.
Okay, I'm going to fast forward quite a lot now because I want to talk about that F2 year, 2018.
Oh, okay.
So you've worked your way up through the ranks.
Yep.
It's a really competitive year. You finish third behind Lando and George.
Yes.
But you didn't actually have an F1 opportunity straight away, did you?
No, I was very lucky. Go back a year from there. It was 2017, and no. Sorry, you're right. Midway through 2018, I was having a strong year. I think I was at that point in the year I was running second in the championship, fighting with George, and there was all this movement about Daniel leaving Red Bull. And at that point, you know how Red Bull is. Everyone starts to move up. And I realistically knew there was no chance that any of these other Formula 1 teams were ever going to consider me apart from Red Bull, because they're the only ones that realistically would have a seat available. I called up Helmut to ask him what's the situation, and he said, no, there's no space. I thought, okay, that's fine. I don't mind. Formula E. And so my journey was in Formula E, and I signed my contract. Everything was going towards that road. Honestly, in my head, people have asked me, well, you saw George and Lando, they were confirmed for next year. I was just happy to become a professional racing driver, actually earn some money for once, how the difficult road is within motorsport. And it was the beginning of something I was excited for, until after the last race in Abu Dhabi, Helmut called me back and kind of said, "Oh, by the way, there's this opportunity. You can take it or not." And of course, at that point, I said yes, and changed my career path.
So Red Bull really do give you this lifeline into Formula One.
They do,
and it's a quick promotion, really. I think a lot of people forget that you were actually at Toro Rosso for a bit, and then very quickly it became Red Bull. And you get a couple of seasons there. I mean, look, I know you've spoken quite a lot about your time there and how you look back on it. But overall now, especially when we see what's going on with, Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson and Checo and the list goes on.
Yes.
How do you reflect on all of that now and looking at those guys in that second seat?
I empathise with it. I see it quite clearly. I think it's split in many ways. The time that I was at Red Bull, as you said, I joined 6 months into my Formula One career, and I just realised, in hindsight, I was in a predicament when I joined the team at Red Bull because I had a car that I wasn't comfortable with, and I didn't have the experience to get myself out of it. I struggled with it, but my experience level wasn't to the point, and my maturity as a human being, to understand how to get myself out of that situation. I see it now, and I understand the same feelings. I speak with Yuki a lot, try to help him in any way I can.
Didn't you coach him for a bit as well?
I did, really, I did.
Yeah.
Yes. So we have a great relationship, and I really love Yuki. But it's hard. I think you got on the other side of the garage, arguably the best driver that's driven a Formula One car. I mean, that's a big statement, I know, but I do really mean that.
I think a lot of people would agree with you.
He can drive a car that's not comfortable to drive, and I think that car he can hide a lot of problems, and he's the one that can clearly drive it.
So a new chapter at Williams over the last couple of years. This year obviously is a real step up. What's different about Williams compared to what you've experienced previously?
I would say it's easy to say, oh, the car's got quicker, clearly, but it's the culture that's changed. That's been the biggest change that I've seen. We've had ambitious targets every year, but there's a belief and there's a vibe within the factory that when I first joined was kind of actually the pre-James era, and in many ways it was an unconfident team, quite negative in their approach, and kind of just lost that spark. They were running 10th in the championship for a few seasons in a row, and it never felt like they believed that they deserved more or would be better. And once that all started to change, it feels like we've just got this momentum, and it's a positive, addictive feeling, and that's what I see is this optimism, and that's the drive that's pushing us forward.
It's exciting, Alex, and it's brilliant to see. One final question that we ask everybody who has the unfortunate choice to sit and talk to me for a few minutes. Out of all the races you've ever done, Formula One and beyond, what has been your best race so far?
It's weird because someone asked me this question today.
Oh, what? Yeah. I thought I had a really unique question.
But it's a great question, and I throw it back to, I believe it was 2009. I was in go-karts at the time. I was racing against people like George. It was called the Winter Cup back then, and it was at PFI, which is a kart track in the UK. The week before, I was leading the race, I span, and I finished fourth, I think. So then starting this race, I was leading the race. It was wet. I span, and I dropped to fourth, I think it was. And then it came to the last corner, last lap. Don't know if many people know this name, but I think people in the racing world do. Ben Barnicoat. Ben's a good friend of mine, and we used to be very good competitors. Very good driver, very good in the wet. So it was kind of in his territory, let's say. And last corner, last lap, I overtook him around the outside to get the win. I don't know why, but that race, I still remember it as if it was yesterday. I remember me spinning. I remember the move into the last corner. I think part of the enjoyment from that race was the ability to to recover from, oh man, the team are going to kill me when I get back, to actually coming back, and maybe it was more relief that I feel than excitement, and still, that race meant a lot. Yeah.
It's amazing how that sticks with you.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why it sticks to me so much, but it was a good race.
Well, look, Alex Albon, thank you very much for coming onto the Chequered Flag.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
5 Live's Chequered Flag Podcast.
Great to hear from Alex Albon then. And Andrew, it was a huge result for Williams in Baku. Alex has been having a brilliant season so far. Carlos has not, but this was a nice vindication for him to show that his raw pace and speed is there. What did you make of Baku and Williams?
Well, as you say, Sainz has been having a difficult season so far, but it's not like he was lacking for pace. In terms of qualifying comparison with Albon, they were very even. Albon a little bit ahead, but only a little bit. It's been the race results that Sainz hasn't been able to pull out. There's been a load of bad luck and some errors all mixed in. But it all came together in Baku, and he did a really good job. He was one of the 3 drivers who got a lap time in at the beginning of Q3 before it all started to go a bit mad with the crashes for Leclerc and Piastri. But he actually re-delivered more or less the same lap time in those last 3 minutes, which Lando Norris was not able to do. And Liam Lawson was another one who did a good job on that front with the Racing Bulls. And then, of course, I think the thing with Baku is once Sainz had got himself in that great grid position, overtaking was so difficult. But he did a really strong job to drive a really pacey race, and he only lost a place to George Russell. He was helped, of course, by the fact that overtaking was difficult, and that meant that he was protected from the likes of Norris, for example, and potentially Charles Leclerc's Ferrari, because they just couldn't get past the drivers in front of them. But that's taking nothing away from him, and it was very well deserved, and it's underlined the progress that Williams have made this year. Albon was saying before the Baku weekend, actually, that they'd kind of surprised themselves with how much progress they'd made this year, because they were when they came into 2025 very much emphasising that their focus was on 26 and the new regulations, and they perceived this year as a kind of holding year. But it just goes to show what effect the changes James Vowles has been making as team principal have had on the team, that even though they weren't really focusing on this year, of course they had to build a new car for this year, even though they weren't really focusing on it, and they were putting all their effort in 26 as early as they possibly could, they were still able to make this really significant progress, and as a result of which they had a very strong start to the season. And Alex Albon more or less single-handedly established them in a very strong 5th place in the Constructors' Championship very early on, and there's been pressure coming from Racing Bulls and Aston Martin as their forms improved over the year, but obviously this result from Sainz in Baku is really going to help them consolidate that place. And at the moment, unless there's some really bad luck or a freak result from someone, it looks like they're going to get that 5th place, and that's a testament to the work that Vowles has been doing there.
Yeah, it is, and they reaffirmed their hold on 5th, considering they finished last year 9th in the Constructors' Championship. That is a massive improvement. I actually had the pleasure of sitting next to James Vowles on the plane on the way to Baku last week, so I had a bit of a chat with him. And it's amazing. I mean, I thought he was being quite candid and honest. I'm sure he was holding some things back, but we were just chatting about the general layout of Williams and how far they've got to go. He's still far from happy from where they are. They want to, be winning races and going for championships once again. But even just to look at the kind of improvements they've made at Grove in their factory and how dated some of their facilities were, and they're still not all complete yet. So they've got a long way to go there and hiring new people, but they've got a really strong driver lineup. Alex Albon, I think, has impressed above and beyond since the beginning of this year. Carlos Sainz is a known quantity and looks like he's making those breakthroughs now. So I think it's a very, very exciting time for Williams going forward into a new regulation set next year. But that is the thing, when you press the big reset button, what happens? Before we go, talking about what could happen, we have to mention Fernando Alonso, the 2-time world champion. He's made some interesting comments recently about Aston Martin's competitiveness, but also his future, Andrew.
Yeah, now, just in the context of Williams, of course, it's Aston Martin's competitive failure this year that has helped Williams get to that position, because they were 5th in the championship last year, and they've not produced a very good car. They have made progress as the year's gone on, but obviously their hopes, a bit like Williams, are all on 2026, with Adrian Newey coming in as the managing technical partner and leading the design on that new car. And so Alonso did an interview with the Aston Martin website, which was published a couple of days ago, as a bit of video has come out on social media. It's typically for Alonso, it's a very interesting interview. And the most interesting thing he said was about his future. Now, Alonso's contract runs out at the end of next year. And the question has always been, what's he going to do? Does he want to carry on at the end of 2026 when he's going to be 45 and a half? Or does he want to retire? And when I interviewed him at the end of last year in Abu Dhabi, he said that he would go into the year considering it as his last year, but he would keep his mind open and see how it went, and if things went well, then maybe he'd change his mind. Well, what he said in this interview with Aston Martin was that if things go well, it's a very good moment to stop, because I've been chasing a competitive car and competitive racing for many, many years, and if I have that, I think it's a good way to close my career. So let's say that if we're competitive, there's more chance that I stop. If we're not competitive, it'll be very hard to give up without trying again, which is really interesting because it's kind of the exact opposite of what you'd expect, Harry, isn't it? You'd think, well, if they're rubbish in 26, he could think, the Newey's coming, they still can't produce a competitive car, I'm 45 and a half, I might as well stop. Whereas he gets his hands on a competitive car, has a good year, and then stops. I still can't get my head around it, really. I don't know. With Alonso, you never know what else is going on in the background. He's so clever. He's so across all the angles. There could be so many things going on, of course. If they are competitive next year, of course, the thing is that the Aston Martin might become more attractive to another driver. And because Alonso's getting on a bit now, no evidence at the moment that he's losing any performance. They might think, well, we can't commit to a 45 and a half year old. Maybe we should get someone younger. I don't know, but I guarantee you, Harry, that one of the first questions he gets asked on Thursday in Singapore next week is going to be, hang on a minute, why do you say this? And I suspect he won't say anything, because the thing about Alonso is that he makes his point, he says it the way he says it, and no matter how many times you go back and ask him in a different way with a slightly differently angled question, he fundamentally just carries on saying the same thing. But it won't stop us all trying.
No, I'm good. I think that Thursday press conference before Singapore, or indeed just in the media pen, depending on who's talking to, is going to be one to look out for dear old Fernando. A storyline that will be very interesting watching for next year, along with the many. Before we do sign off, one small feel-good story that actually broke before we came on air for this podcast. 5 years after his abrupt end in Formula One, following that horrific crash in Bahrain, Romain Grosjean is returning to Haas for a private test. It's a nice gesture from the team. His long-term race engineer, now team principal, Ayo Komatsu, returning to his role on the radio for Grosjean, along with many of his original race team. Which that's really nice to see, isn't it, Andrew? It's a sort of proper fond farewell. No sign, though, of that Mercedes drive that I believe Toto Wolff once promised him.
Yeah, Wolf said that he would give him a drive, didn't he, in an F1 car just to welcome him back. That hasn't materialised, and I'm not that surprised, frankly. It's a nice feel-good story. I don't think Romain Grosjean's about to come back to Formula One. I think that chapter of his story has passed. He's obviously been to IndyCar since F1. That didn't really work out either. So he's racing in sports cars, I think, at the moment. But, they're a nice touch team, aren't they? I'm not surprised they've pulled this together for him. It's a little test in Mugello he's going to do in what they call in Formula One a TPC test. It means testing of previous cars. It's a couple of years old, that car, so I'm sure he'll have a fun day.
I think so. And actually, I think one small sort of highlight of this is Haas, with that Toyota partnership now, have really taken a step up with their TPC testing, because they've had Ryo Hirakawa going around. I think they went to Fuji with another one of the Japanese Super Formula drivers as well. So they've really made a step up with that Toyota partnership and being able to run basically old cars for the first time.
Yes. I mean, obviously, that's the Toyota partnership it's mutually beneficial. Toyota got into that because they saw, effectively, they basically were seeing that Honda was attracting all the good Japanese drivers because they all saw Honda as a potential route into Formula One, whereas Toyota didn't have a potential route into Formula One to attract young drivers with. So by getting involved with Haas and giving them tests, it gives the Japanese drivers another Formula One focused option as they're trying to progress their careers. And of course, Honda and Toyota are very long-standing old rivals in both the Japanese road car market and, of course, racing as well.
Well, that, I think, just about covers us off for this edition of the Chequered Flag Extra in the non-race week. So thank you very much, Andrew Benson, as always. We will be back next week for the Singapore Grand Prix, where we'll have all of our usual stuff, including our Chequered Flag reviews and previews, plus live coverage of every session across the weekend. You can listen to all of that on BBC Sounds, and all information such as session times and exactly where you can hear us will be on the BBC Sport website. Thank you very much for your company. This has been an IMG production for BBC Sounds.